Up and over now. Final answer should be down. Hand those up. Name at the top, -3 after it. If you haven't signed into your calculators yet, please do so now. Is there anyone in here, we know one, is there anybody else in here who has not taken their exam yet? For this unit, just so you know, you have all of your note packets themselves, the stuff we're working on in class. There is a physical copy of that there. For you and your homework for this unit, you'll go through and see, this is the other section, but it's the same. 3. So this is you guys, you'll see posted up there is a bunch of files, and it says on it, Chapter 2, notes, homework, etc. You're going to go to homework calendar with the questions on it. Click on the link instead of printing it out, and apparently getting yelled at for wasting paper. We went through, and here's all of the questions that you have for homework tonight. You're going to have to do them out on separate paper, but it's just an electronic copy as opposed to sending out the individual. You also have a Math Excel assignment. I think it's due on the end of the day on the 28th. Is that right? The 28th? 28th? Okay. So it's waiting for you. It's due by midnight on the 28th before I get the panic emails. If you wait until, midnight of the 28th, or like towards the end of the day on the 28th, and you have trouble logging in, that's not the goal of it, is to wait until like the last possible minute. With computers, things sometimes go wrong. So make sure, please, that you go through and deal with your homework before that last possible minute. Because once in a while, we'll get like a sporadic panicked email for a situation that can be avoided entirely. I haven't had a chance to go through. Actually, maybe I did. Because did we have class yesterday? No. Okay. So by and large, I think I've graded your tests. If I remember correctly, I have your test graded, but they don't, they're not all the way, or they're not input into the computer just yet. But in any case, when I was going through and looking, so I love what these things are. So when I was going through and looking at how you all did on your exams, there were actually the data was bimodal, which means that there's two groups of scores. And looking at it, there was a subset of you, and if I remember right, it's either this class or the other one. I might have the numbers mixed up. There's 28 of you normally, I think, right? So I think that this is how it broke down. That out of the 28 of you, that there were 13 that scored in a 90 or above, which is pretty decent. But then there was another subset of you of about 10 that scored, if I remember the numbers right, between a 73 and an 85, which is sort of the second wave. So there were sort of two lumps of you. And so then I started sitting there and I was looking at it, and some of you, again, in the first class alone, there were 400s, which is very, very difficult to go through and do. So I started looking now and going, what is the disconnect here? What is the issue? And going through and looking at it, this came up. So let's ask this question. If you don't feel comfortable answering, you definitely don't have to. Let's say this. Did I pull you out your grades from your GREs yet? Think about what your your course average was last year, which is the 4 quarters that you go through and take. You had a number for that on your report card. And by and large, since you guys tend to worship grades, you most likely know that. Then you had your Regents exam. Raise your hand if you scored lower on the Regents exam than your 4 quarters. And again, you don't have to, if you don't remember, that's fine, but the other end, don't be this, because I just need to get an accurate, I got nice and high, unless you have a dislocate. Okay, sure. Now, raise your hand if that gap was at least 5 points. So if the score, there was at least a 5-point difference between your read. Again, this doesn't help me, I'm bad. I need glasses to begin with, okay? Raise your hand if that gap was 10 points. You don't have to, okay. Okay. Was there anybody that was over 15? The other class, we had 7. Okay. That to me, and this is the part 2, where some of you are going to start misconstruing. I, number one, could care less what you got in terms of grade. Because trust me, I could go through, if you gave me enough time, if I really focused, I could probably get my dog to pass that exam. Probably. It would require some tape to get a pen on his arm and to teach him some mild algebra and how to step on the buttons on the calculator. He's pretty smart. The other end of it, though, is you have to be honest. And I had somebody come in, and this was what dissed me. Somebody from the first class goes, well, I saw my score. What can I do for extra credit? That means that you're focusing on entirely the wrong thing. Entirely. If you want to worship a number, we can write 105 on the wall. You can pray towards it 5 times a day if that's what it takes to make you feel fulfilled. The number means absolutely nothing. It's what you actually understand that is what you should be going for. Understanding what we're doing as opposed to worshiping some number. So if you know like 80% of the material, your grade should be about an 80. Now, the thing that got me in the last class, I think the biggest difference we got was 23 points. If you have a 90 for 4 quarters and you take an exam that has a 26-point curve and you score a 70 or a 72, which of those numbers is wrong? The 4 quarters or the exam score? The quarters are way too high because your teacher generates the test. There's so much grade, and I went through and looked, there is so much grade inflation, it's ridiculous. And to show you what I mean, I went through and looked, and it's not to be disparaging of you, and let's not get it confused. By no means am I saying any of you can't, and any of you shouldn't be in this room. By no means. Get that out of your head now. Because then we're going to have this enabling group. Oh, I need a 96. You sound like junkies on intervention. I need my good grades. Oh, my life. This is how I validate myself. Stop it. It's ridiculous. You worship these numbers instead of focusing on understanding. So here's what so again, to show you why, one of the 35,000 reasons why I'm so amazing. I went through and pulled out the enriched scores from last section. And, so here's how it ended up being. I think it was 50 students right on the button. Right, 50 students on the button, okay? Here's their Regents exam. Here's their final average. This number is the difference between them. It's almost the exact opposite of what happened before. They went through, so this person here had a Regents grade of 84 and a quarter average of 77. All of these numbers here that are in orange are kids who scored higher or the same between their 4 quarters and then. That is 38 out of 50, okay? What percentage is 38 out of 50? How can we find that out? Go to your calculator. Thank you. 76. 76. Now again, raise your hand here if it was that the 4 quarters you scored lower. Your Regents exam was lower than your 4 quarters. Nice and high. Okay? Literally, that's like 90% of you. Our results are going to be the exact opposite. Who felt during that exam where you sat there and go, we didn't learn this? At least one question. See? Again, I sit here, my head starts going numb. Raise your hand if you sat there and thought during the exam, in general, I didn't feel well prepared to take the exam. Who felt like that? Good. Understand this. I don't care where you came from. We're going to get there at the end. But what needs to change for some of you is you have this false sense of where you are. There's this dissonance between what you're actually performing at and what you think you're performing. 90s are tough grades to get. And if you look at the 4 quarters, we had some, oh wait, go up all the way. There we go. So here's their grades from largest to smallest. We had a bunch, but notice those kids, and again, 22 out of 50, that's 44%. Who in here had a grade in the 90s for your 4 quarters last year? Did they also just did you get like candies I mean, they hand that out. You don't know 90% of the material. So what they're doing is, and again, it would be so easy for me, and maybe this is why I'm dumb. It would be so easy for me to be like, you know what? You are such a terrific printer, and your penmanship is so, I'm going to give you a 93 for the year. Do you know anything? No, but you made me, oh, and then you know who's happy? Your parents are happy. Who here, by the way, any of your parents disappointed at your Regents exam? Right? Yeah, they should have been. They have every right to be. Absolutely every right to be. Think of it this way. If I go through, right, let's say Miss Bailey and I are both going to run a half marathon. And I tell Miss Bailey, you know what? Let's run together. My pace is about, I can run an 8-minute mile. And then we get together to go running. Do you realistically think I can run an 8-minute mile for half of a marathon? Why are you saying no? I'm in perfect health. No, I could barely drive an 8-minute mile. Who's going to be disappointed? Miss Bailey, because she's dependent. And I lied to her. I told her that I was good to do it. Was I? No. And it's not that I'm not mad at you in the least. But I sit there and then I need you to change your focus. Because if I go through and ask you, let's ask this, who can tell me something that they know about inverses? Let's leave it completely open. Inverses. What?
A function is an inverse if the regular function is 1 to 1.
The inverse function will be a function if the regular one's 1 to 1. I can get that. Who can tell me something else to know about inverses? What?
The domain of the function is the same as the range of the
Yep. Who can tell me something else to know?
The inverse function is a reflection over y equals x.
Good. What else do we know? Okay, take all your x's. So you see what I'm saying? You have to know stuff. And then to go and answer the questions, you have to be able to apply those basic understandings that you're supposed to have. So when we're going through and looking at it, some of us don't have that understanding, which to me is disheartening. Now, even look at this, though, again, to go back to what's so amazing. Here's, let's do largest, largest amount. All of these at orange were kids that scored better, so that's 38. But look at the kids who didn't score at what their Regents grade was. These kids right here had a 1-point gap below. Who here would have been happy with getting 1 point less for their Reg than they did for the 4 quarters? Okay. And I look at this, this were catastrophic. These were 2 points below. So right now, we are at 46 out of 50. What percentage is there? 92. Your grade was right, their grade was right, for 92% of the kids. 92%. The lowest that I had was 9 points here. And these kids got 4s and 5s. Their class averages. Look at where the numbers go for the averages. Let's see this. Here's their Regent scores, largest to smallest. All right, so I only had 100. These two kids, by the way, both screwed up a negative sign. And, excuse me, this young person made a rounding mistake, which means they got visited by the rounding fairy over the summer, and that's not a good thing. It's the evil sister of the tooth fairy. I had 35 out of 50, which is 70%, get an 85 or above, and to me, that was catastrophically bad. If you think for 1 second that we settle for mediocrity, you're wrong. And let's be very clear with you. We set high expectations for you because you can do them. I had some papers in here that I almost wanted to frame. They look like little works of Mona Lisas. But if you didn't know, does that mean your self-worth is tied to your grade? No. Your value says, oh, I got a 90, I must be a good person. I can assure you, there are people who are profoundly intelligent who are huge jerks, let's say. The other end of it, though, is it's just to be honest with you about where you are. I never want, when you leave that Regents exam, I want you to say, God, that was easy. And when you say, I don't know, I want it to be on one question, be like, God, I got to this last question, we were solving this quadratic out, and I thought that these were the answers, I didn't know whether to reject the one, I think that I did it right or I didn't. That's where I want you to be at. That's the stuff I don't want you to know at the end of the exam. But I also don't want you thinking you're a 90% student, because it gives this false sense of confidence, almost arrogance about it. You go, I should be getting 90s. You will if you know 90% of the stuff. You absolutely will. And don't get it wrong, because I can't tell you how excited. I told you, you all are my soldiers. All of you. We're going to war against Webster Thomas Enriched students. We will slaughter them. It's not even going to be funny. I told you, the results are going to be so great over here, they're going to get rid of the teachers' cards. They're going to ask you all, like they have you come and help with the Chromebooks. They're going to say, can you all come over, please, and help with these Thomas Algebra 2 students next year? They did terrible, and you all scored 100. It was shocking. It was almost like we got the exam early, and every one of you scored 100. That's what I want them to say. That's where I want us to be at. You have to be an achiever. But to be an achiever, you also have to put the work in, and for all of you, that's going to be different. When you feel nervous or you did badly on a test, it's because you don't know it as well as you think you did. It's not because of malice, or that you're angry or something like that. But you have to, if you do well, you have to step up your game. We've had 7 graded assignments so far, 8 as of today. Was that assessment number 8? Is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
so assessment number 8, plus your exam, we're going to have quizzes coming, all of that stuff. You have so many grades you're going to be sick of. Sick of. But you have to make those connections. And for all of you, the amount of work you're going to have to put in is going to be different. But by no means, this is what you all belong here. You really all do. The part that gets me is if you're willing to put in the work, we will get you there. For all of you, that's going to be different. But you have to have an achiever's mindset too when you go through and do it. Because that's the part that I found so discouraging is people are like, no, well, I can't do this. Oh. We're going to call a ambulance for you so you can get treated. Because I can't tell you how frustrating it is to have somebody who's got a closed mind to begin with. You're like, I can't do this. Well, absolutely can. It's going to take a heck of a lot longer for some of us than others. You all know there's probably people in this room who get math homework done in 5 minutes, and then there's some of you who it takes half an hour to an hour with help with the math ready. You know who you are. You know better than I do. I'm just getting to know all of you. Well, you can achieve and you can do great things, but you have to want to. And we'll get every single one of you there. But then the last thing that I want to see is, it was almost universal in here that you scored below. And it's almost universal that we in here score above. Every time. But you have to change your mindset for some of us. And you have to be willing to put forth the work. And you have to be willing to get there. But we will get you all there. Don't worry. I would love it if they went through. I just want to see, even if our class average was as low as like a 92. I would take that if it means that we beat Thomas. I'd take it. And if you score, just so you know on a side note, if you score above an 83 on that Regents exam, you get to take pre-calculus as a dual credit course. Which means it's 4 college credits. Anywhere that takes state aid, which is pretty much every college, takes those 4 credits. You can leave high school with up to 12 credits from math alone. So I can't more strongly encourage you, and we'll get you all there. But you've got to go through and want to get there. Got it? Now, we're going to have the rest of the notes today. I'm not sure we got too much. Have your notes out, please, and make sure that you signed in your calculators if you haven't already. Today's stuff should be kind of easy and kind of review. The first thing that we're going to talk about is, if you didn't pick one up, they're over. Oh, am I out? Sorry. If you didn't get one, sorry, there are no packets on the side. The first thing that we're going to talk about is simplifying out square roots. If the square root is given to you, you assume whatever sign it has. If you take the square root of a number, then it's going to be plus or minus. The square root of a negative number we are not allowed to take yet. We will be, I think, even by the end of this unit. It's not a real number, and we are not able to work on things that aren't real numbers just yet. The principal root is the positive one. If I say x squared equals 16, let's say it, we gave you 16, so let's say it's x squared is equal to 81, you're going to have two answers. And you need to remember it's plus or minus. If I ask you to take the square root of 81, that would be 9. The negative of the square root of 81 is negative 9. You assume the principal answer unless you are taking square. And I think we talked about this before. In an equation, the highest power, that's going to be the number of answers that you get. So if it's x squared, that's what we would have. Questions on that? All right, let's bounce over, please, to the next page, or sorry, to the next one. If I ask you to take the square root of 169, hands up, please, if you can tell me what number times itself gives me 169. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, what do you want to say? 13. And it's only positive 13 because the root was there to start. Now over on the other side, if I ask you to solve this out, I'd add 1 to begin with. And I've got x squared is equal to 169. From here, I take the square root. And I get x is equal to plus or minus 13. There's two answers, and I know that because the equation was x squared. That's going through and solving a quadratic equation by going through and taking square roots. Questions on that? Take a look at question number 3. When we look at what's there, then what would your first step be in solving out number 3? So I've got 4x squared is equal to 49. What would we do after we did that? Anna? So we're going to go through and divide both sides by 4. And I get x squared is equal to 49 over 4. What would we do next from here? Hands up, please, if you can tell me. Alexis, what do you say? Now, for some reason, we get stuck here. If I asked you to go through and do this, who can tell me what the square root of 49 over 4 is going to be? You don't need a calculator. Yeah, 7 over 2. What's wrong with this as a final answer? It's plus or minus because the equation is an x squared. We took the square root. We put it in there. Now, for 4, this one's going to be a little bit different. Looking at what's there for 4, what would our first step be for 4? Hands up, please, if you can tell me. What would you do to get an answer in 4? Take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to go through, take the square root, and I have x squared is equal to 50. So now I'm left with x is equal to, and I'd say plus or minus the square root of 50. Now, this is a part where it's a little bit awkward because we haven't quite reviewed it yet. Do any perfect square numbers go exactly into 50? Wow. That's a geometry thing that you should know.
25.
25 is a perfect square number, and it goes into 50 exactly. So x would be equal to, I'm going to break this down into its perfect square factors, which are 25 and 2. You can take the square root of 25. And Nathan, what's the square root of 25 going to be? So this would be x is equal to plus or minus 5 radical 2. You could mindlessly type that in the calculator, but in most cases, you're going to be asked to go through and evaluate it out exactly. Now, when we go forward and simplify these out, the first thing that you need to know is what your perfect square numbers are. For some of you, you need to take a really good review of this. First thing up is you need to know 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. These are numbers you're supposed to know. 6, 7 is 49. That's 7 squared. 8 is 64. 9 would be 81. 10 is 100. We keep going. 11 is 121. 12 is 144. 13 is 169. 14 is 196. 15 is 225. 16 is 256, and it continues on. If you ever need to, you can bounce over to your calculators and go through and type those in. Take 1 squared, 2 squared, and so on. The part that's going to be new for some of you is this. If I ask you to go through and take the square root of x squared, you're asking what times itself gives you x squared. Now, we're going to give a generic, which is technically incorrect, Algebra 2 Regents answer. And I'm going to give it because this shows up in calculus, and the way that you answer it in Algebra 2 versus calculus is different. What times itself gives you x squared? Technically, the answer is the absolute value of x. However, the Regents would just have you list the x itself. When we go on to calculus, you need to know it's technically equal to the absolute value of x. Because when we take the input and square it, what did I lose if it was there? The negative sign. However, the Regents would just have you leave it as an x. What about, what's the square root of x to the 4th? Hands up, please, if you can tell me what that would be. The square root of x to the 4th, or what times itself gives me x to the 4th? We seriously have one person. 2, what times itself gives me x to the 4th? Now, we'll just say x squared. You can save the absolute value part for when we have calculus together. Take a look now. What if I asked us this? And by the way, this is a square root. There's what's called an index value here. It's hidden if it's a 2, or you don't write it in if it's a 2. Who can tell me what the square root of x to the 7th is going to be? Well, if you follow the pattern, what you're asking is, how many times does the index go into the exponent? In this case, your index value is a 2. How many times does 2 go into 7? Hands up, please, if you can tell me. How many times does 2 go into 7? 3 times with a remainder of 1. So if it doesn't go in exactly, you take x to whatever that remainder power is. Remember, you take the index, divide it into the exponent. Does 2 go into 7? Yes, 3 times with a remainder of 1. How about this? Who can tell me what they think the square root of x to the 13th power would simplify down to be? What do we think x to the square root of x to the 13th power, what's that going to leave us with? We got 1, 2, 3 of you. 4. Oh, wake up. Wake up. 5.
X to the 6th with a remainder of 1.
So x to the 6th, radical x. 2 goes into 13 6 times. What about this? What if I gave you the square root of x to the 101st power? The same principle applies as before. Who can tell me what x to the 101st power, the square root of that, would simplify to? We got 3 people. 4. Wake up. 5. Good. So x to the 50th out front, and then a root x left over. Your index value is a 2 if it's not written in. Looking at what's there, hands up please. Hopefully we can burn through 5 and 6 pretty quick. Hands up and tell me the answer for 5. It's the square root of 225. X to the 8th. If you need to use a calculator, that's fine, but it's not going to simplify out the radical for you. Who can tell me what the square root of 225 x to the 8th is going to be? We have one person. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do you say? Who can tell me what the answer to number 6 is going to be? Questions on that? Now, some of these we need to break things down. Looking at question 7, 12 isn't a perfect square. And this is a part where some of you, it's going to mean, if you're not here yet, you need to make sure you are. 12 is not a perfect square number. What perfect square goes into 12? Hands up, please, if you can tell me the biggest perfect square factor of 12. Abby?
4.
4 times what?
3.
Good. Now, let's keep going and we're going to break this down. X to the 9th isn't a perfect square. How can I break down x to the 9? Does anybody want to take a guess?
X to the third.
No? X to the 8 times an x. Because that's going to still give me x to the 9. But what can I take the square root of that's there now? X to the 8. And the y to the 14th, is that a perfect square? Absolutely. So we get to this point. What can I take the square root of? You can tell me what I can take the square root of that I just listened. I did all of this garbage, so taking the square root of this is something I don't have to be a mental math all-star to do. Jessica R., what do you want to take the square root of that's there? And what is it? Okay, can you keep going, or are you cutting? What can you take the square root of that's there? Careful. Just the x to the 8. And that would be x to the what? And can you do the y's? Now, these become coefficients in front. So this is 2 times x to the 4th times y to the 7th times the square root. And in the radicand, I still have a 3x. Questions on that? You should be able to do them, and they're supposed to be simple. Now, how is number 9 different than what we've done before? Well, now we're talking about cube roots, which is what times itself 3 times. Notice, what is your index value on a cube root? 3. That's the value that's sitting out there on that perch. So, let's think of our perfect cubes. Perfect squares mean nothing when you're dealing with cube roots. My perfect cubes are going to be, now 1 cubed is 1. 2 to the 3rd is 8. 3 to the 3rd, hands up please, and tell me what 3 to the 3rd is going to be. Terrific, 27. How about 4 to the 3rd? You can tell me the next one on the list. What's that? No? 64. 5 to the 3rd, you can tell me what that one's going to be.
125.
125. And I think it's 216 and 343, and then the list continues on from there. That's not what I'm concerned about, because you can generate that list anytime you've got the calculator. Here's the ones that I need us to make sure we're very, very solid on. Who can tell me what the third root of x to the 3rd is going to equal? What's the cube root of x cubed going to be? Follow the same pattern. Terrific. How about this? What's the third root of x to the 5th going to equal? This one's going to be tough. This one's tough. We'll see if you can follow the pattern that we did previously. What do you think it would be? Take that first step. It's better to fall down and get back up, because you're going to know the second time you're not going to make the same mistake. We've got 4 or 5 of you.
X cubed radical x squared.
Close. Remember, how many times does 3 go into 5? 1. So this shouldn't be x cubed, but x to the 1st. How about this? Who can tell me what the cube root of x to the 34th is going to be? The cube root of x to the 34th. This one's tough. You can use the calculator to help you if you need it. You got 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. Taylor P., what do you think? How many times does 3 go into 34? Okay, with the remainder of what? What would I get rid of, though, when I gave that out as my final? What doesn't need to be there? This little 1 that's there. But that's absolutely right. What about this? How about the cube root of x to the 100th? If you need to use the calculator to help you, that's fine, but let's get it done and get used to these number facts. We got 2 people, 3, 4. John Paul, what do you think?
X to the 30.
Good.
Cube root square the best.
Close. It's just the cube root part. Questions on there? Now look at what's there. 9, easy. Who can tell me what 9 is going to be? Who can tell me what 9 is going to be? We got 1. Really? Alex, what do you think?
4p. 4.
This next one's a little bit more interesting. 10, they're both perfect, all three of them, excuse me, are perfect cubes. You can take the cube root of a negative number. Why can't you take the cube root or any odd root? Yeah. There you go. 3 negatives is a negative. Who can tell me what number 10 is going to simplify down to? Simplify the individual pieces and you're going to get your answer. Who can tell me what 10 is going to simplify down to? We got no persons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Abby?
3 to the m to the second, n to the 6.
You should be angry right now. Don't throw it. What? There you go. There you go. You can take, if the index is odd, you can have a negative radicand and work with it. If it's even, you can't. All right. This is getting redundant. Let's do out number 12. Negative 81 is not a perfect cube. Who can tell me the smallest perfect cube, or sorry, the biggest perfect cube that goes into 81? And if you don't know, you don't get it by staring at me. Find your perfect cube list and start dividing in. I need the biggest perfect cube that goes into it. We got 1, 2 so far, 3. How do you want to break this down? 4. Are they going to know? Nick R., what do you say?
-4.
No. We need a perfect cube.
60.
No. It's got to go in exactly. It's got to go in exactly. They can't have anything left over. You know? And it's -27 times 3. Now, I want to break down the m to the 10th, so I list out m to the 9th times m, and the n to the 12th I'm good with. From here, what happens next? What do we do next? 1 person. 2. Erica T., what would you want to do from here? What can you take the square root of, or sorry, cube root of? What's that going to be? Close. -27. The cube root of negative. Yeah. Can you take the cube root of anything else that's listed out? Which would be? Can you finish it off? That's great. So my answer is going to be -3 times m to the 3rd times n to the 4th times the 3rd root of 3m. Questions on that? That's tough stuff. Now, perfect fourth. This is when, as soon as I go, when does it stop? We're going to go all the way up to 95. We're going to have you do though is, I don't know the numbers, so go into your calculators and build our list of perfect fourths. 1 to the 4th, shockingly, is still going to be 1, so that's not helpful to us. What's 2 to the 4th going to be? Hands up, please, if you can tell me that. Nope. 16. What about 3 to the 4th? Hands up, please, if you can tell me what 3 to the 4th is going to be. 81. How about 4 to the 4th? Hands up, please, if you can tell me what 4 to the 4th is going to be. 256, all right. Next one up is 5 to the 4th. Hands up, please, if you can tell me what 5 to the 4th is. So we can keep doing this all day. And you can take the 4th root. How about let's simplify down number 14. I'm going to take the 4th root here. Who can tell me what's the biggest perfect 4th that goes into 32? Hands up if you can tell me here. 16 times what? That's great. So we've got 16 times 2. And now from here, I'm going to say m to the 10th. Catherine, how do you want to break down m to the 10th? Because that's not a perfect fourth. Good. And is n to the 12th okay? Or do we need to break that down? That's okay? Good. Can you finish this out? What would your final answer be? What are your coefficients in front of the fourth root? What goes here in your final answer? We did. We took the fourth root of it, and it's 2. And took the fourth root of the variables as well. So what would you say is your final? What goes in front of the radical? What's left after we take our square roots? When you take the fourth root of 16, what do you get? 2. What else needs to go in front? And what's left in the radicand position?
2.
Now, one thing, a notation thing, when you list out the fourth root, you literally need to list out a radical with a little, and then you put a tiny 4 on it. Right, that's what your notation should look like. Now, the next thing that we're going to say is this. You're not allowed to leave a radical in the denominator in Algebra 2. The way to get rid of them is very easy, especially once you get the hang of it. We're going to ask you this. What's the only number I can multiply anything by without changing its value? Hands up, please, if you can tell me. There's a number we can multiply anything by this number without changing its value. What do you want to say? 1. Does it matter whether it's the number 1 or 7 over 7 or root 8 over root 8? They're all equal to 1. So multiplying by any one, regardless of how good it looks or not, is going to help us simplify this down. Looking at what's there, I need to, right now my problem is I have a root 5 there in the denominator. I need the root 5 gone. So I'm going to ask this. Hands up, please, if you can tell me the smallest value, the smallest perfect square value that 5 multiplies into. What's the smallest perfect square that 5 multiplies into? I've got 1, 2 of you, 3, 4, 25. What do you have to multiply that 5 by so it goes or becomes 25? Okay, so I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator of this by root 5. This is just an ugly 1. When we say ugly 1, we're talking about something that looks like that. Now I'm going to multiply going across. I get radical 60 in the numerator over, what would I have in the denominator? Hands up, please, if you can tell me that, going across. Root 25. Now this cleans up nicely down below. In the denominator, you've got a 5. That's gone. Now look up in the numerator. Do any perfect squares go into 60? And the answer is yes. Go through and find it. We'll wait for 6 of you that can tell me. Go find your perfect square list if you need to and start dividing. We've got 0 persons that can tell me the biggest perfect square that goes into 60. It's not math magic. You get it by going through and doing it. Find it. It's got to go in exactly by the way we got 1, 2, 3 of you. Thank you. 4. What's the biggest perfect square that goes into 60? 4 people. Biggest perfect square that goes into 60. 5, 6. Christina, what do you say? 4. What's the, and it's 4 times what? So what's the square root of the perfect square number? 2. And then what's left in the radicand? Final answer. Questions on that? You don't have to show the breaking down all the time. As honor students, you should be capable of doing that in your head. Questions on that? Let's take a look at the next one. This one's a little bit more awkward. The denominator got an 8x square rooted. What's the smallest perfect square that 8x will multiply into? The smallest perfect square that 8x will multiply into. Then we'll make it happen. What's the smallest perfect square that 8x goes into? Close. You're missing one little piece. Because I said 8x. 16x squared. So we need to take care of the number and the variable. What do I need to multiply this by so I get a 16x squared in the denominator? Who can tell me? What ugly one am I going to use for this that results in me getting a 16x squared? Really? Really? What? So I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator by the square root of 2x. So when I multiply across, I would get radical 10x. Nothing simplifies there. And then in the denominator, you can tell me what the denominator is going to be. You can do this little bit of mental math in your head. You multiply across, you get 16x squared, you take the square root. What do you have? You got 1, 2, what? Terrific. Can these x's here reduce out? No. Questions on that? Let's try to see if we can maybe get one more. Oh, here's one. Got the square root of x over 2. Break it up into two radicals, root x over root 2. What ugly one would I use here? What ugly one would I use here? So I multiply by ugly 1 of root 2 over root 2. And this would leave me with root 2x in the numerator over 2. 2's don't reduce out. That's what you're left with. Questions on that? I think we can get one more in since we went so fast. Look at the next one. Oh, fourth root, or is this a cube root? This is a cube root. All right, we'll do this one. So this is the cube root of x squared over the cube root of 3y. What's the smallest perfect cube that 3y will go into? What's the smallest perfect cube that 3y will go into? Jared? What do I need to multiply this by so I'm left with that 27y to the third that you want to have happen? 9y to the second. So that's a cube root of 9y squared. So when I go across in the numerator, this is going to be the cube root of 9x squared y squared. Can't simplify it down. Can't take the cube root of 9, not the square root. We can take the square root, not the cube root. And then in the denominator, you have the cube root of 27 y cubed. Well, what's the square or cube root of 27y cubed? 3y. Now, your homework is listed out for you on the computer. You're going to have to log in to get it. If you need to get reset on yourself this unit, do it. Don't ask for extra credit. I'm going to say this, by the way. Show me that it's an outlier. If you go through and give me 2 scores on your next exam that are terrific, does that show me that the one was an anomaly, a mistake? Sure. And we'll omit it when we compute your grade. Show me it's an anomaly, though. Don't ask for extra credit. Show me that I'm a 90 student who happened to do bad on one exam. Do your best. By the way, make sure your homework is done on separate paper. We're going to hand it in next time we have class. Where can you find the homework? There you go. Post it through the classroom. Do your best, love. Have a great night. What's going on, man? What's going on with you?